So now we will continue on with the spear abilities, perks, passives, and mastery tree. The two weapon trees for the spear are Zoner and Impaler. And the three spear abilities that I use are Skewer, Sweep, and Perforate. Now, going with Skewer. Skewer is a jumping lunge that rushes you towards your target, and it deals 125% weapon damage and applies a bleed. And this is considered a spear bleed. Now, this spear bleed deals 20% weapon damage every second for 10 seconds. So, in total, this comes out to 200% weapon damage just from the bleed alone. Very, very strong. And the first upgrade is Deadly Ambush. This passive deals 20% increased damage to enemies at full health. So this is a great perk if you're initiating combat with the spear. You're going to want to start with the skewer just so that you can get the most damage possible. Next, we have Follow Through. Follow Through grants a 20% in power for 10 seconds if a skewer hits and crits. Compared to all of the other passives that we've seen so far, like with the Rapier, how it just says it's a damage increase, this is an Empower. Empower is different from damage increase as far as text goes, because those damage increases do not count towards the Empower cap. This is the only Empower that we have in the build, and I mean, the Empower cap is 50%, so we can definitely fit some additional Empower somewhere. If you switch weapons, the Empower falls off, and if you sheath your weapon, the Empower falls off. So I make this mistake often where I'll switch back and forth between Rapier and Spear after I crit with the Skewer, and I just pretty much, I'm letting go of a free 20% damage because I'm dumb. But hey, that happens sometimes. Next perk. The final upgrade for Skewer. Deep Wound. This passive increases the bleed duration of the Skewer by 5 seconds. So effectively, this is another 100% weapon damage. A lot of people don't realize just how long this bleed lasts. I mean, 15 seconds is a long time. In total, that's 300% weapon damage because you're ticking them for 20% weapon damage every tick. So 300% weapon damage over 15 seconds. You don't even have to hit them, and you're still dealing damage to them. Really, like in a duel where you're not using pots or anything, this one ability can pretty much deal like over half of your opponent's health if you land it. The next ability that we're going to be going over is Sweep. The hitbox for this is an arc, pretty much. And it's an arc around you that sweeps your enemy's legs and causes the knockdown, dealing 75% weapon damage. Once you get used to the actual range and the angle of the sweep, you'll be able to easily knock down multiple enemies at once, because you're going to know exactly where you need to be. You need to position yourself in order to actually do the sweep correctly and knocking down those multiple enemies. This does not mean that you should be going into a clump of enemies to try and get the most out of your sweep. If you're trying to fight in a clump, chances are there's going to be other melee players there that have grit, and you're not going to be able to do the knockdown for this. So do not try to fight in a clump and try and sweep people just for the knockdown, because odds are half of them are going to stay up and you're going to get your face bashed in. The first upgrade for the sweep, Tenacious Sweep. This provides grip for the sweep animation only. if you can time it right, you can actually prevent a knockdown or a stagger that you know is coming just by using the sweep. So this allows you to perform the sweep with a less likely chance of getting interrupted during that sweep. So great defensive perk right here. And finally, the last upgrade, Coup de Grace. Coup de Grace is it's a heavy stab to the ground that deals 150% weapon damage. It's a lot of damage. And you activate it by pressing the light attack during the sweep animation. So while Tenacious Sweep does give you grit during the attack, it does not give you grit during Coup de Grace. So you do not have grit while you are in Coup de Grace. So you can be staggered during this, and you can be even knocked down during this. Like it's happened to me. It's annoying, but hey, it happens. The tracking for Coup de Grace, it's pretty good. The only downside to it is the limited range of the hitbox itself. It's very, very short range hitbox. So either the tracking has to be really good or your aim with the camera has to be really good in order to actually hit people that aren't knocked down. Because you can still hit people even if they're not knocked down. You just have to be really close to them. The tracking does the rest of the work, and you're pretty much stabbing their foot. Overall, sweep, it's meant really to be an interrupt. Or at least the way that I use it. I use sweep as an interrupt against my opponent. And while it does have the potential with Coup de Grace to be a very high DPS killing blow, I primarily use it defensively, mostly because I want it to be used as more of a setup to skewer or perforate. Now, last ability that we take is Perforate. This ability consists of 3 quick thrusts that each deal 80% weapon damage and rends the target. Rend reduces a target's damage absorption by a percentage amount. Perforate reduces a target's damage absorption by 5% per hit. And this rend lasts 10 seconds. So if you get all 3 hits, that's 15% rend. You only get 2, that's 10. You only hit 1, that's 5%. This is a great ability for busting through tanky players' defenses. So heavy armors, medium armor, this ability definitely is worth it. So the tracking on this ability, it can be useful, as it does move your character slightly forward. And then once you're actually within like regular honing tracking range, it will start pushing you even more towards your opponent. It's not the best. And if you miss the tracking on it, you're pretty much just standing there stabbing at the air. It looks funny, to be honest. Whenever I see someone or I see myself miss a perforate, it's not pretty. So the first upgrade for the Perforate is Rupturing Strikes. This increases the rend from 5% to 10% per hit on targets that are above 50% health. So this is going to make your Perforate more effective against higher health opponents. The last upgrade is Impactful Strikes. This upgrade causes Perforate to stagger enemies if all 3 strikes land. Now, this is incredibly useful, as it can be used as an interrupt on an enemy's abilities, or if they're winding up for, say, a heavy attack and they do not have grit active. This is a great way to stagger them out of that windup. Now, the stagger itself from this passive is very inconsistent. There's been many times where the stagger actually will come on the first hit of Perforate, and sometimes even on the second hit. And then there's times that it doesn't even proc at all, even after landing all 3 hits of the Perforate. So just be wary of that. Even though you have this passive selected, it may not always occur. So yep, that's it for the abilities and their upgrades. Now, compared to the Rapier abilities, the Spear abilities do not have as many upgrades. So the rest of these points that go into the passives are very important and pretty much will dictate your playstyle. Now, the first non-passive or non-weapon ability passive that we're going to take is Deadly Consistency. This deals 10% increased damage on consecutive heavy attacks against single targets or against a single target, and it can stack up to 3 times for a total of 30%. You will rarely be forcing yourself to be standing still just to keep launching heavy attacks. However, a caveat is that the spear heavy attack range is pretty high, and it's one of the longest in the game. So it's very effective if you're zoning out another melee player. Not a lot of people use heavy attack for the spear, so not a lot of people are used to the timing of it. And similar to Greatsword, the tracking is deceptive, and the timing can really throw a lot of experienced players off because they're just not used to handling a spear heavy attack, as well as its tracking and distance. The next perk that we take is Invigorating Crits. My oh my, I love this perk. Invigorating Crits provides us 20 stamina per critical hit. This is another bread and butter passive for this build. Like, if you're not tracking now, this build does a lot of dodges, so it consumes a lot of stamina. So stamina regen, stamina generation is the name of the game for a lot of these passives. So this passive does not stack even if you crit multiple players at the same time with a single ability. Just know that you're only going to be getting up to 20 stamina per ability use or per attack. This pairs extremely well, like I said, with the playstyle, as you know, like you're constantly repositioning yourself to get that backstab and to get that critical hit off. For the next perk, Merciless Strength. Merciless Strength gives us a 25% increase to damage against opponents or targets that are knocked down. So this provides a lot of burst with your sweep follow-up. So that's why, you know, like you can go with the coup de grace, and mind you, it is a lot of damage. I am not denying that. You can get a lot of killing blows just with the coup de grace. You can deal like maybe 30, like close to 30 to even 40% of your opponent's health just from this and this together, as well as the other passives working in tandem with each other. Just it takes practice to be able to do that, and majority of the times I'm playing against pretty experienced PvPers, and they'll pretty much do something that kind of like counteracts that. So I usually just follow up with a Perforate or a Skewer if I can, just to keep sustained damage instead of burst damage sometimes. It all depends on the situation, really. So, moving on back to the Impaler side. First, we're going to be taking Refreshing Jabs. So, Refreshing Jabs provides a 10% cooldown reduction to all of our spear abilities if you land the second hit in the light attack chain. So even if you miss the first hit, as long as you get the second hit from the light attack chain, you'll get your cooldown. Cooldown reduction, like I said, with the Rapier, cooldown reduction on any build is fantastic. You always want to be using your abilities. So the light attack tracking on the spear itself, it's okay. In comparison to other melee weapon light attacks. Uh, I will say though that once you are like within tracking distance, the distance that you go, it's pretty far. The spear cooldowns in general are really short, so yes, this is a great passive, but it is not 100% necessary. You can go with something else. You can go with like precise jabs or another passive in this side or this side. But at least for myself, I like it. I enjoy using it. It works for me. Next passive, we have Finishing Blows. Finishing Blows gives us a 15% increase to damage against players below 30% health. This is a must-have passive because, I mean, when you're alternating between Spear and Rapier, we saw before that one of the Rapier passives was you deal more damage to players with higher health. This passive is the opposite, where you deal more damage to players with lower health. So typically, you want to be initiating combat with your Rapier, getting them down low enough, and then finishing them off with the Spear. Of course, like I said, very situational sometimes where, you know, your cooldowns for your Spear just aren't up, and it's better to just switch over to the Rapier. Mind you, it's very situation dependent. In general, though, you want to be using your Spear on low level targets. Or not low level, but low health targets. Next passive we take is Unerring Precision. So this passive gives us a 20% increase in damage to players with active grits. This is specifically to fight against other melee players. It is extremely effective. Once you see that your opponent is glowing with the grit aura, you know that you're going to be dealing 20% increased damage to them just from this passive alone. In general, though, this is a great passive for when you're just brawling against another melee player. You're going to be doing more damage as far as like you're going to be doing more consistent damage with this, if that makes sense. Next, we have my favorite passive on the spear, Aggressive Maneuvers. So, Aggressive Maneuvers, this passive, when you have it, every hit that you get with an ability, or the first successful hit that you get with an ability within 2 seconds of dodging, reduces all your spear cooldowns by 20%. Roly-poly life over here. I love this perk so much. I remember the time when I finally saw it, and I was like, wait, this is perfect for my build. And I started playing it. Immediate success once I started playing this. Love this passive. The spear cooldowns themselves are relatively short. This just makes it so that you're constantly rotating between your abilities and dodging. So yes, love this passive. Must have for any spear player, honestly. Next we have Exposed Wounds. Exposed Wounds gives us a 15% increase in crit chance when attacking a bleeding target. Now, like I was talking about before, bleeding target is not exclusive to a spear bleed. This can be another bleed, say from another teammate. If they're running a Rapier bleed, that counts as a bleeding target. If you have Keenly Jagged on your weapon, that counts as a bleeding target. So you don't have to have the Skewer hit in order to have this perk active on you. You have other methods of having this passive active. And finally, for the last passive, our capstone for the Impaler tree, Exploited Weakness. This gives us a 10% increase in bonus damage for each debuff on an enemy, and this can stack up to 30%. So 3 debuffs. Spear itself can consistently provide 2 debuffs in the form of the Rend from the Perforate and the Bleed from the Skewer. Both of these debuffs are 10 seconds or longer. So it's important to remember that this capstone perk triggers from any debuff that the target has. So this is the best passive overall as far as damage goes for the Spear.